All right, I think we're rolling. Yeah, let's go with this. Hello, my name is Sergeant Anthony Edward Lewis, United States Army Infantry, retired and prior service Marine. Today is May 16th, Saturday. The year is 2026. The time, 1947, Valparaiso local time. The title for this message is The Hero and Superhero. The Hero and Superhero. Earlier today, I was having a conversation with my wife, who I'm very, very, very proud of. She succeeded in publishing a coloring book called Sabrina the Superhero, and it's a beautiful thing. As she was taking off to go run some errand, I mentioned to her, you know, this reminds me of the more familiar superhero Wonder Woman. You know, Wonder Woman, what her superpower was empathy. And because she was rushing off, I wasn't really able to fully explain what it is I meant by that. But it's been an idea for a project of mine for some time now to put together a message that includes an explanation of that principle, among other things. The character that Jokima creates in this coloring book is called Sabrina. And Sabrina is a superhero just like every other superhero. I'm talking about all the ones that we are familiar with. So that means her origin story is going to be similar to Batman, Iron Man, Hulk, The Flash, any Superman, any superhero you ever heard of. They have an origin story. And so Sabrina has an origin story too. And that is the story. It's not possible to separate the message from the messenger. As soon as you find out about the artist that created this character or created this identity, you end up finding out what is truly beautiful about this form of artwork in all instances. And I wanted to be able to say that, but while she was driving away, I really couldn't get into it. But I promised myself that I was going to give a more full explanation. And so this letter to her, I hope to be able to make available to other people who can appreciate the beauty of this art form. This hero. If you ever see the movie Kill Bill, I'm talking about the second Kill Bill Volume 2. You hear the Nemesis character Bill describe. He goes into a rant. He really goes into a description of the origin story of Superman. And what you end up finding out is that the superheroes they represent an identity that espouses and advocates, champions a certain set of values. The way in which we are able to identify these heroes is by their identifying marks, and it's those identifying features that help them symbolize a set of values. They wouldn't be superheroes, regardless of whatever their superpowers are, if they didn't identify with some values. And as a matter of fact, when comic books started out, that was the thing that was key. You wanted to know what the superhero's motivation was. They usually had some kind of tagline. Superman had the tagline, truth, justice, and the American way. And every superhero that there ever was, they have a core set of virtues and values and principles that they identify with. And this is what makes them the heroes we want to emulate. You don't have to be a truly awesome, supernaturally empowered human being to have those values. And what I saw in the character Sabrina was her power to give in spite of her own affliction. Now, the Bible actually talks about this sort of thing. There's some kingdom principles involved with that. But it takes a certain kind of character to want to create such a superhero. There's a book that, where is it? The book, yeah, here it is. The Social Psychology of Disability. Now, I'm just started reading this with her, but I'm anticipating one thing, and one thing most significantly, and that is the phenomenon of creating, I don't want to say an alter ego, but a projection of an identity. I know this is getting real, this is really stretching it, but this is something that I anticipate that if this book is all that it seems to be cracked up to be, it's going to touch on how people create an image of the thing they want to be in order to make it possible to accomplish something very, very difficult. Recovering from a tremendous disability qualifies as a sort of challenge that would logically lead you to believe that what's necessary in order to cope with the struggle or accomplish something supernatural could require the creation of an identity. Creating the identity. We have the ability to change the way we look with our clothes. We have the ability to change our voice. We have the ability to learn new languages. We have the ability to code switch and do so many other fascinating things. But when you make the decision that you want to visualize, and that's what most athletes do, they visualize themselves doing something very, very difficult and being successful in doing it, or doing something that's never been done before they do it. One of the greatest gifts God gave us is the power of creation. You have the ability to recreate yourself or create something completely separate. If that is a method that can be used to reinforce a coping mechanism, if that works for you, then who's the judge to say there's anything wrong? But you can also see expressed in those terms is potentially very dangerous. With great power comes great responsibility. You know, the mind has power that we don't fully understand at all, with or without disabilities. But that same power, if it's perverted, could be very, very dangerous. I believe that the power of creation is one of the greatest powers God gave us. And I believe that He gave us that power in order to be able to overcome affliction and adversity, just like what we see with amputation and other critical disabilities. The history of heroes is vast. But I think that it's important to call attention to the fact that before you can become a superhero, you first need to be a hero. Regardless of what phenomenal quote unquote power you acquire, and that's a whole book right there. These different things that people consider to be powers. If it's not the power to validate life, it's not really anything except a way to suicide and self-destruction. You have to have core values in you before having any special gift, talent, ability, or access to resources can be useful, valuable, productive, constructive. We have in us great power without any supernatural influence. But whatever power we have, if it's not focused on doing something that validates life, is ungodly, unhealthy, and ultimately destructive. One of the things that you hear often is how people's lives change after they win the lottery. And what does that money do? That money, it doesn't change you to make doing what's right better. It doesn't change you to make it easier for you to do something that you're not able to do already. It reveals what was already there. And everybody knows this. There are too many people who, guess what, as soon as they get a whole lot of money, what ends up happening? They lose it all in less than 2 years because of who was inside from the beginning. The money just helps reveal what was already there. And it is possible for you to then do what? Use that windfall blessing to get better at who you are. But, well, you can see the logic and the reasoning behind that point. It's old, tried, true. You can't keep doing the same thing expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. I'm reminded of this movie. I got a movie reference for everything. Besides Kill Bill, I was reminded of this other movie, uh, The Girl in the Pearl Earring. And this feature film, it uncovers the backstory of the artist that created this famous classic portrait. And most people, guess what? When they see it, it's not really inspired. On the surface, it doesn't look special. It's a still life. It's a portrait. The name of the movie is the name of the portrait that everybody knows, and nobody knows anything about the artist that made it or his backstory or what he was going through at the time in his life when he made this portrait. But guess what? All the questions that you could ever have about Alexa, who painted the picture Girl in the Pearl Earring? I wish I knew it off the top of my head.
From infoplease.com. The Girl with the Pearl Earring is a painting by the Dutch artist Jan Vermeer.
Vermeer. You hear the name and
this might answer your question.
Alexa, stop. And you think Picasso. He's world famous. Van Gogh. He's the definition of a world-class, world-renowned artist. And people know this painting, but what do you know about him? The man who made it. You understand that a part of the reason why the portrait became so famous is because of his story. He became a hero for some principles. And so the picture becomes an artifact and a symbol for those values that were lived out in this artist's life. He was a champion and a hero for those values. And so when we look at that art piece, we're reminded of those values. That's very powerful stuff. And so when you look at another art form, when you look at the Hulk, Batman, Iron Man, Wonder Woman, Superman, Doctor Strange, when you hear the names, it conjures up a mental picture of not only what it is they're capable of doing, how they operate, but what their motivation is. You can identify them because of how you know they're going to respond to different situations, moral dilemmas, different crises. And those are the things that our heroes inspire us to emulate. The hero inside the superhero is our commitment, our ability to commit, identify, and commit to those core values. And as a matter of fact, if we could not identify those core values and virtues, the superhero wouldn't mean anything. And here's another movie reference. You're going to love this one because you're probably going to wonder, where'd that come from? Dr. Detroit, Dan Aykroyd, creates a hero character. Ridiculous. I might as well just say, Harold and Kumar. This is just too bizarre and too strange. But you'll know that this really does link together when you look at the ending of Dr. Detroit. Dr. Detroit was a college professor at the University of Illinois in Chicago on romantic literature. And he ended up getting sucked into some crisis. Really, it was two crises. It was a group of ladies of the night that needed help getting away from a corrupt and compromised pimp. And the university, maybe it wasn't the University of Chicago, it was some other smaller college in Chicago, that was strapped for cash and was about to close. Now, this was decades ago. That was a part of the backstory, the drama. In order to be able to deal with these two competing imperatives, he wanted to save these women, he wanted to save the school, he had to create a hero. That is the whole premise. And in doing so, at the very end of the movie, he explains, that's exactly what I did. This is the reason why I did it. This is why it became necessary. And guess what? The phenomenon repeats itself. Zorro, Don Quixote, Man of La Mancha, we create these heroes and project our virtues and our values onto them in order to inspire ourselves to do great and wondrous things, miraculous things. My Bible says, greater things than this shall ye do also. So this actually the power of creation that we get from God. It's also in line with other kingdom principles that allow us to command a blessing. When we use our tremendous gift from God to glorify Him, when we decide that we want to do something that is consistent with the will of God, if we're using as a mechanism or a vehicle some superhero or not, guess what? You cannot fail. With God on your side, you cannot fail. You're actually performing a function that connects with kingdom principles that's well known. any of us has access to it as long as we have that creative spirit in us. And if you're inspired to project all of the things that you would so very much like to be able to do, what's in your heart already, then guess what? That superhero is able to help you visualize what's hard to see right now. For the superhero, they have grace. They have the ability to do easily the thing that you're struggling with. They have figured it out. I may not be all that smart or intelligent, but I can imagine what somebody smarter than me is capable of doing. And that's what happens when you create this superhero identity, alter ego, this personality. You have the ability, we all do, to create an identity that's able to do what we're not able to do but wish we could. But the process of creating those characters helps us find a way by their example. The conversation I had started with my wife before she ran off was to point out that Wonder Woman, her superpower is empathy. And as a matter of fact, I think she might be the only one. One of the things I remember especially well from the television series with Carter, Linda Carter, before she would engage in any kind of combat or fight with somebody, she would always do this. She would strive to engage her opponent mentally, intelligently. She would try to, this is the epitome of Sun Tzu. What does Sun Tzu said? The epitome of strategy is winning without fighting. And so really what Wonder Woman would always try to do is avoid a fight if possible. It didn't matter whether or not she was stronger than whoever it is. She didn't want to ever have to fight anyway. And why would you? You just like to fight? Some people do. And they think that the only way in which you can ever solve or resolve a conflict is with with combat. And it's not. You after you beat somebody to a pulp, what have you accomplished? What do you have then? Really, you have more trouble. Always. Sun Tzu knew this, and he tried to teach us this. And as a matter of fact, I'm convinced Wonder Woman embodies this principle. First, know your enemy like you know yourself, and you'll win every battle. But even before you get to a place where you have to fight anybody, risking yourself or risking the moral hazard of destroying somebody else and having that on your consciousness, having the fallout of all that on to live with. How about this? Find out if it's possible to turn your opponent into your ally. Her superpower was to engage a potential adversary in the mind space first. You find out what this person is dealing with or what it is they're trying to do. You may find out that this is an opponent that you can't beat. Under your own power, no matter how powerful you are. Who would willingly and knowingly enter into a losing proposition like that? That's stupid. In the Army, we have an expression, you're either smart or very strong. Wonder Woman's superpower was the ability to find And in every episode of the television series, in the end, there was a resolution that was sustainable. But all of the other toxic masculine superheroes that are really, really popular, guess what? There's peace when anyone that could be identified as an enemy is dead. Now, there's some Marine Corps ideology connected with that. But consider the statistics, the numbers, the odds. If the only way in which you are ever able to resolve a conflict is by dominating, then eventually you end up coming in contact with an opponent that you can't dominate. And you have to try to find, and there's 5 classic ways in which you can deal with conflict. You have to find some other strategy, tactic to deal with conflict when the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer. Every problem looks like a nail. I think that Wonder Woman had the best tool. And not just because she was successful in later movies and television programs, able to align herself with other powerful superheroes. The best solution, regardless of who you are or who you are aligned with, is to never fight. Especially never fight any losing battle. And always aspire to quickly settle the issue, because no nation ever succeeded in winning a protracted war. So I believe Wonder Woman is the best superhero of all of them. Not prone, like so many others, to shoot first, ask questions later. The power of creation is the greatest gift we get from God. When we use that gift to honor God, we command a blessing. We pervert it, and we commit a sin and invite condemnation when all gifts are from God. When you pervert the gift God gives you, you become ungodly. The gift doesn't become ungodly. You do. When you decide to do something with what God has given you, to do something ungodly, He's not pleased with that. And you can count on, because God is not mocked, you can count on consequences. And one of those is going to be the power or resource or talent or gift that God gave you is either going to go away, it's going to be taken from you, or cease to be effective. One of the things that I wanted to be very, very careful about was talking about this thing called suspension of disbelief. You know, this is the thing that you see with every movie, every adventure movie or action movie. You have to sit and watch it. You're reading a book, you're watching a movie, you're following the story. You have to believe in the situation, you have to believe in the characters. And I was kind of concerned about Sabrina the superhero and the suspension of disbelief. Even if you believe that children are very impressionable and might believe that someone like Sabrina could exist, or might have trouble with that. You know, that doesn't really matter as much as the intent that's in your heart with creating such a character. Because after some meditation, reflection, I came to a realization that we have Sabrina's superheroes already. One of the things that you see with the Batman character, I really like the one played by Ben Affleck. The Batman character, you know what his superpower is? Money. And he expressed it as such in one of the more recent Batman movies or Justice League movies. He's human, just like anybody else. But what's the superpower that he has? This money that enhances, magnifies the core values that were already in him. His lust, desire, passion, and insistence on pursuing justice. That was already in him. Before he had money, he had that in him. And so the money actually just what? Reveals those character traits, those ambitions, that vision, that dream, that desire. And so with Sabrina, you know, let's just say hypothetically, Sabrina decides that she wants to um, court